The soft autumn breeze rustled the trees lining the quiet streets of Maplewood, a small town nestled in rural Texas. Evelyn, a 72-year-old widow with silver-streaked hair tucked under a faded sun hat, walked hand in hand with her 10-year-old grandson, Caleb, toward the neighborhood market. Her steps were slow but steady, each one fueled by love and quiet determination. Evelyn's clothes, though worn and aged, were meticulously clean. She took pride in her appearance, not for vanity, but to show Caleb what dignity looks like even in hardship. Caleb, with his freckled cheeks and untamed brown curls, swung their joined hands and hummed a tune, unaware of the storm that often brewed behind Evelyn's warm smile. Inside the store, the bright fluorescent lights reflected off neatly stacked shelves, a world of abundance that always felt slightly out of reach. Caleb's eyes widened as they passed rows of snacks and shiny boxes of cereal. Evelyn paused briefly at the bakery aisle, glancing at a familiar treat: cinnamon rolls, the same kind her late daughter used to buy for Caleb before the accident. Her chest tightened, but she took a breath, tightened her grip on Caleb's hand, and moved forward. Today, she just wanted to make him smile. As they approached the checkout counter, Evelyn felt the familiar tightening in her chest. Her hand reached into her worn purse and pulled out a small cloth pouch filled with coins, each one carefully saved from clipping coupons and skipping her own needs. Caleb stood beside her, holding a pack of cinnamon rolls to his chest like treasure. The cashier, a lanky young man named Jason, looked up from his phone and immediately sighed when he saw the handful of coins. His posture shifted from bored to irritated in an instant. "Seriously? You're paying with coins?" he muttered loudly enough for nearby customers to hear. "Ma'am, this isn't a coin exchange." Evelyn's face flushed with embarrassment, but she said nothing. Her hands, though slightly arthritic, began sorting through the coins with precision and care. Caleb, sensing the tension but not fully understanding it, looked up at her with concern. Jason leaned on the counter and let out an exaggerated groan. "Hope everyone behind you brought a snack. This is going to take a while." Whispers trickled through the line. A woman glanced at her watch. A man huffed and crossed his arms. Evelyn's cheeks burned hotter. Still, she kept counting. "Maybe next time, bring a debit card like normal people," Jason added, now clearly trying to entertain the line at her expense. A few chuckles echoed through the store, but others looked away, uncomfortable. Caleb tugged gently on his grandmother's sleeve. "It's okay, Grandma," he whispered. "We can put the cinnamon rolls back. I don't really need them." Evelyn's eyes welled up. He was only 10, but he was trying to protect her, shielding her with the very strength she had spent her life pouring into him. "No, sweetheart," she said softly. "We'll figure it out." Jason, hearing this, smirked. "You can't even afford cinnamon rolls? Maybe don't shop if you're not ready to pay." That was the breaking point. From the middle of the line, a tall man in a black leather jacket stepped forward. His voice was calm, but it cut through the tension like a knife. "That's enough." The line fell silent. Jason blinked in surprise. "Excuse me?" he asked. The man took off his sunglasses, revealing a pair of sharp, steady eyes. His gaze didn't waver. "You're humiliating an elderly woman in front of a child. Is that how you treat customers here?" Jason tried to recover his authority. "Look, man, she's holding up the line." "She's paying," the man interrupted, "and that's all she needs to do." Evelyn looked up, confused and touched. Caleb gripped her hand tighter. The man turned to them and offered a soft smile. No one should be made to feel small for doing their best, he said. In that moment, the air shifted. The tension began to dissolve, and a new feeling took its place: hope. The store was still and silent. You could hear the soft hum of the refrigerators in the background. Jason stood frozen, his smirk slowly fading into uncertainty. Evelyn, still clutching her last few coins, looked from the stranger to the cashier, trying to process what was happening. The tall man, Samuel, stepped closer to the counter. His voice remained calm, but his tone was firm, commanding the attention of everyone within earshot. "You don't need to know someone's story to treat them with kindness," Samuel said, staring directly at Jason. "That's not just bad customer service, it's cruelty." Jason crossed his arms in defiance. "And who exactly are you? Her lawyer?" "No," Samuel replied, removing his jacket slowly and folding it neatly over his arm. "I'm just someone who believes in treating people with dignity. You should try it sometime." A murmur rippled through the line. Some nodded in agreement. Others pulled out their phones, recording quietly as the moment unfolded. Jason looked around, realizing the spotlight was now on him, and not in the way he wanted. Evelyn stood silently, unsure of what to say. Caleb, still holding the cinnamon rolls, stared wide-eyed at Samuel as if he were watching a real-life superhero. Samuel turned to Evelyn, his voice softening. "Ma'am, may I take care of your groceries today?" Evelyn opened her mouth to protest, but the lump in her throat made it hard to speak. She managed to faint. "I couldn't possibly." "You've done more than enough," Samuel replied gently. "Let someone help you for once." Then, in a surprising move that stunned even Jason, Samuel took out his wallet, handed his credit card to the next cashier, who had stepped in to replace Jason, and said, "We're starting over. Ring everything up again, and add the cinnamon rolls." "But why?" Evelyn whispered, tears pooling in her eyes. "Because you matter," he said, "and so does he." He glanced down at Caleb, who now had tears brimming in his eyes too, though his face glowed with the kind of joy that had long been absent from it. Jason backed away from the register as the new cashier stepped up. Samuel looked at him one last time and said, "You don't have to work in a place like this to change the world, but you do need to decide what kind of person you want to be when no one's looking." Jason said nothing. His face had turned a deep shade of red, and shame clung to him like sweat. As the scanner beeped and groceries moved down the conveyor belt, Evelyn looked over at Samuel, her voice cracking. "You've changed this day for us. I'll never forget it." Samuel smiled gently. Sometimes the smallest moments of kindness leave the biggest marks. And just like that, the unexpected became unforgettable. As the final grocery bag was placed into the cart, Evelyn stood motionless for a moment, overwhelmed. The last 30 minutes had flipped her world upside down. Humiliation turned into hope. Shame transformed into warmth. Her heart was still racing, but for the first time in months, it wasn't out of fear. Caleb clutched the cinnamon rolls like they were made of gold. He looked up at Samuel with a wide-eyed admiration reserved for storybook heroes. "Thank you, sir," he whispered. "You're like one of those good guys in movies." Samuel crouched to meet Caleb's eyes and smiled. "The real heroes, kiddo, are people like your grandma, who give everything they have just to make sure you're okay." Evelyn placed a gentle hand on Samuel's shoulder, her voice trembling. "You don't even know us. Why would you do all this?" Samuel glanced at her with sincerity. "Because someone once did the same for my mother years ago. I never forgot that kindness, and I promised myself, if I ever had the chance, I'd pass it on." Tears spilled down Evelyn's cheeks. Her dignity remained intact, but now it was bolstered by something more powerful: belonging. For so long, she'd felt invisible, just another elderly woman trying to survive in silence. But now, standing here in a grocery store with a stranger who treated her with compassion, she felt seen again. Meanwhile, across the store, Jason leaned against a stockroom door, his head low. He watched the interaction from a distance, the weight of his words crashing down on him with every passing second. He hadn't expected to be confronted, certainly not like that. He thought he was just doing his job. But now he couldn't shake the guilt twisting in his chest. The murmur of the customers had shifted too. Where once there had been annoyance and eye rolls, now there were soft smiles, quiet claps, and nods of approval. People weren't just witnessing kindness, they were inspired by it. Jason rubbed the back of his neck, took a deep breath, and slowly walked back toward the front. When he reached the counter, he looked at Evelyn, then at Samuel. I was wrong," he stammered. "I'm sorry for the way I treated you. It was disrespectful, and I see that now." Evelyn gave him a kind but tired smile. "We all have bad days, son. What matters is what we learn from them." Samuel added, "Growth starts with humility. You took the first step." Jason nodded, his voice quieter now. "I want to do better." Caleb looked up at him and said simply, "That would be cool." The moment wasn't loud or dramatic, but something inside each person present had shifted. Evelyn realized she wasn't alone. Jason realized the impact of his attitude. And the rest of the store? They saw firsthand what compassion in action looks like. A few days had passed since that unforgettable day at the Maplewood Market, but Evelyn still replayed every detail in her mind. Each word from Samuel, each tear in Caleb's eyes, every act of kindness. It all lingered like a song she couldn't stop humming. That morning, as she sorted through groceries in her tiny kitchen, a knock echoed at the front door. Evelyn wiped her hands on her apron and opened it cautiously. "Good morning, Ms. Evelyn," Samuel greeted with a gentle smile, holding a small gift bag in one hand and a folder in the other. He looked just as composed and kind as the day they met, but now his presence brought comfort instead of surprise. "I hope it's not too early," he added. Evelyn stepped aside, smiling. "You could have come at midnight, and I'd still be grateful." Samuel chuckled and followed her into the modest living room. Caleb was on the floor nearby, sketching spaceships on the back of an old newspaper. He lit up the moment he saw Samuel. "You came back?" "I did," Samuel nodded, "and I brought something important." He handed Evelyn the folder, which she opened carefully. Her eyes widened as she scanned the documents. Papers for a fully funded education scholarship for Caleb, covering everything from elementary tutoring to future college costs. This can't be real," she whispered, her voice catching. "It's very real," Samuel replied. "I spoke with a few people I trust, people who've seen what potential looks like, even when it's buried under hardship. Caleb deserves a chance, and so do you." Evelyn sat down slowly, overcome by emotion. "I've spent so many years just surviving. This is the first time I felt like we could actually live." "That's exactly what I want for both of you," Samuel said. "No more choosing between bread and books. No more going without just so he can have a smile." He reached into the gift bag and pulled out a small, brand new laptop. "This is for Caleb, so he can start learning, exploring, and dreaming big today." Caleb took the laptop with trembling hands, as if afraid it might vanish. "I can keep this?" Samuel nodded. It's yours." The boy ran to his grandmother and hugged her tightly, his joy so contagious that Evelyn laughed through her tears. Then Samuel added, "And Evelyn, there's one more thing." She raised an eyebrow, still in disbelief. "I've arranged for your house to get some much-needed repairs. New insulation, safer wiring, and a ramp for the back porch, so you don't have to struggle with those old steps anymore." Evelyn covered her mouth in shock. "You've done everything for Caleb," Samuel continued. "Now, let the world take care of you for once." In that quiet home, filled with love and peeling wallpaper, a new chapter had begun. Not just a blessing, but a second chance, wrapped not in money or fame, but in humanity. Weeks rolled by, and the once faded rhythm of Evelyn's life had begun to change, not just in circumstances, but in spirit. The days no longer felt like a battle for survival. They had become moments to cherish, filled with possibility and light. The modest house in Maplewood was undergoing quiet transformation. Workers came and went, fixing broken fixtures, installing new insulation, and even painting the porch a gentle sky blue, Caleb's favorite color. Evelyn watched them from her rocking chair, her hands wrapped around a mug of warm tea, still amazed that this was really her life now. But the changes weren't only physical. Caleb, once shy and often reserved, now carried himself with quiet confidence. He spent afternoons video calling with a volunteer tutor Samuel had arranged, and had begun building Lego rockets, inspired by the online science videos he could now watch on his new laptop. For the first time, he was dreaming out loud about becoming an engineer, an astronaut, or maybe both. "Grandma," he said one evening, sitting beside her as the sun dipped below the trees, "do you think Mom would be proud of me?" Evelyn placed her hand on his heart. "She's always been proud of you, and now the whole world will know why." Meanwhile, across town at the Maplewood Market, Jason was a man transformed. After his public humiliation and sincere apology, he didn't just sulk in regret, he chose to grow. He volunteered for customer service training, started assisting elderly shoppers with their bags, and asked his manager if he could help run an upcoming Kindness Initiative week for the store. Every time a customer came through with change, Jason treated them with patience and respect. He even began to recognize the quiet struggles behind tired eyes, something he once ignored completely. One afternoon, Evelyn returned to the store, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. When she approached Jason's lane, he straightened his posture, nervous but hopeful. "Mrs. Evelyn," he greeted with a gentle smile. "How's Caleb?" "He's thriving," she replied. "He's reading science books like they're comic strips. And you seem like you're thriving too." Jason's face softened. "You taught me something that day, about what kindness really looks like. I used to think helping people wasn't my job. Now I realize it's all of our job." Evelyn nodded, her eyes full of grace. "It's never too late to be better. That's the real miracle, isn't it?" As she left the store, Jason returned to his work, but this time he did it with heart. Back home, Evelyn tucked Caleb in under freshly washed sheets. He smiled sleepily and whispered, "Samuel is like a guardian angel, isn't he?" Evelyn kissed his forehead. "He is. But you know what, Caleb? You and I, we've grown wings too. Because sometimes the greatest growth doesn't come from what we get, but from what we choose to become when given the chance." It was a crisp Saturday morning when Samuel's black SUV pulled up beside the park in Maplewood. The sky was painted in hues of gold and blue, and laughter from children filled the air. Evelyn sat on a bench under the old oak tree, watching Caleb kick around his new soccer ball with two other boys, his face glowing, his laughter free and wild. Samuel stepped out, dressed casually in jeans and a dark sweater, holding a small wrapped box in his hands. As he approached, Evelyn stood, her smile instant and warm. "You didn't have to come all this way," she said softly, though her eyes said thank you for coming anyway. "I wouldn't miss it," Samuel replied. "I brought something for you both." He handed her the box. Inside were two framed photographs. One captured Evelyn and Caleb at the grocery store that day, she with tearful eyes, him holding his cinnamon rolls. The other was a candid shot of Caleb looking up at Samuel, pure admiration in his gaze. Tucked between the frames was a simple handwritten note. "To remind you that kindness doesn't just change lives, it builds them." Evelyn sat back down, the weight of the gift resting in her lap like something sacred. "You've done more than I ever imagined possible," she said, her voice trembling. "I wish I could repay you." Samuel shook his head gently. "Evelyn, you've already given me something priceless, perspective. We live in a world moving so fast, we forget to stop and see each other. That day in the store, it reminded me why it matters." Caleb came running up, slightly out of breath. "Hey, Mr. Samuel, want to play goalie?" Samuel laughed. "Only if you promise not to go easy on me." As the two headed to the makeshift goal, Evelyn sat quietly, holding the photo frames close to her chest. Around her, the park buzzed with life, but inside, her heart was still. She finally felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Across the town, word of what had happened that day continued to ripple. The video of Samuel stepping in had gone viral, but beyond the internet, it was the impact on people's hearts that truly mattered. Inspired by his actions, local residents started a Pay It Forward project. Meals for seniors, free tutoring for kids, community cleanup days. Even Jason, the cashier, had become a part of it. He started speaking to youth groups about empathy, sharing his story as a lesson in humility and second chances. Samuel eventually stood beside Evelyn again, watching Caleb laugh as he scored a goal. "He's going to do great things," Samuel said. Evelyn looked up at him, her eyes moist. "Because someone believed in us when we had nothing left to give." He placed a hand on her shoulder. "Because you never gave up." As they stood together in that quiet moment, the wind whispered through the trees, and though the world wouldn't stop spinning, for this small family and the stranger who became their blessing, everything had finally fallen into place. In a world that often moves too fast to notice the quiet struggles of others, the story of Evelyn, Caleb, and Samuel is a reminder that kindness doesn't need permission. It just needs a moment. We often believe that grand gestures are what change lives, but sometimes it's a single act of compassion at just the right time that becomes someone's lifeline. Evelyn, an elderly woman simply trying to survive, never asked for pity, only patience. Caleb, a young boy robbed of a mother too soon, never asked for toys, only a smile from the one who raised him. And Samuel, a stranger with the power to walk away, chose instead to stand up. Whether we have a lot to give or only a moment to offer, we each hold the power to shift someone's world. You don't have to be a hero, you just have to be human. Because in the end, we won't be remembered for what we kept, but for what we gave. Next time you're at the store and someone ahead of you is struggling to count coins, offer a smile, or even step in if you can. If you see a single parent juggling groceries and kids, lend a hand. These moments might seem small, but to someone else, they can mean the world. Challenge yourself to notice what others overlook, a tired cashier, an elderly neighbor, a child who walks alone. It doesn't take a fortune to make an impact. Sometimes it just takes empathy. Start with one kind act this week. Pay for someone's coffee. Compliment a stranger. Donate gently used clothes. The ripple effect is real. Be the Samuel in someone else's story.